All right. So why are we here? Well, we know that the impacts of COVID and just volunteering in general, we're starting to see some real shifts in the volunteers that are engaging with us or potentially not engaging with us anymore. COVID really took a lot of programs by storm, changed up the way they had to look at things. We lost a lot of volunteers who were potentially we had to step down due to COVID restrictions and health issues and the like. But now, as we're sort of in this, I won't say we're post-COVID because I don't think we'll ever be post-COVID, but in this new living with COVID world, if you will, we've got a lot of different people out there who are maybe nervous about coming back to these sorts of situations. Maybe their situations have changed where they had plenty of free time in the past, particularly with some of our older volunteers. They've now become volunteers to their family and free childcare and the like because they were able to do so, during COVID and lockdowns and the like. So where do we get new volunteers? Well, it's probably time to start thinking about how can we get our youth involved? And what this will do is allow us to grow our pool of volunteers, potentially bring in new skills, ideas, and energy. And I think that's really important. Programs that don't evolve, don't change, and become complacent and stagnant can actually be just as detrimental to not having people in the programs to deliver your mission. And sometimes getting these new ideas, I mean, I know myself with the radio station I find out a lot about social media and the new social media platforms that are out there just by what the young ones coming in are using. And I like to consider myself a bit of a tech nerd, and yet they're coming in saying, are you on this platform? Are you on that platform? I'm like, what? What are you on about? And that's just one small component. Hearing what they're up to, hearing what events are going on around the place, and maybe being able to sit back and use a business mindset to align to these ideas can really help to refresh and reinvigorate your programs as well. Being able to provide opportunities for youth. I hear a lot of people turn around and say, oh, there's not enough opportunities for youth. Well, is it that there's not enough opportunities or potentially things that youth want to do, they're not being invited to do so. And that can be a real thing where you can sit there and look at your programs and go, well, we want to get our youth involved. There are elements of this we can do. And if they're passionate about something and you tap into their motivations, which we're going to talk about very soon, now you're giving them something to do. And that's a huge, huge opportunity and a win. Maybe you're looking at offering services to a new type of client or customer. I hate to say it, but sometimes having older generation talking to the younger generation doesn't work. And if you want to target a younger clientele, having someone who's on the same wavelength, talking the same language, and let's face it, sometimes they're speaking a language which is alien, it really helps. I thought I was up with the lingo, bit hip and happening, till my kids told me otherwise. Felt a bit bad. And ensuring your programs are resilient and sustainable. It's all about bring the next generation in, succession planning, moving forward. That's the key. And we've kind of had to do this really rapidly with COVID. And one of the messages I've been trying to push since the start of 2020 has been, okay, great, COVID really sucked. There's no two ways about it. But this is the opportunity to make lemonade out of lemons. Continually go back and look at your programs and think differently about it, and take the opportunity to bring in that level of sustainability that you may, hopefully, touch wood, don't need again anytime soon. But if we were to suddenly go into lockdowns, and unfortunately New South Wales saw repeated lockdowns, would our programs be sustainable? Have we put enough in place? And if we were to have to step down our older volunteers again, would we have anyone in our volunteer workforce to help us? So these are some of the things that we can address today. So for the sake of this presentation, who is a youth volunteer? Well, the context around this is going to be someone who's 25 years and younger. I'm currently 40 and I feel like I should be a youth volunteer, but I'm probably kidding myself. I suppose I'd like to think I'm Peter Pan until I'm at a concert and I come out of it the next day and I'm complaining about my neck, my back, my hip, the whole lot. So for this particular presentation, I'm thinking 25 years and younger. You could look at it from the legal perspective of 18 years and younger, but in reality, there is a whole workforce out there of uni students and even young people who are transitioning careers and coming from high school or and looking to get their first jobs and the like, who may just be your target audience. So we'll work around that. We won't make it hard and fast. When we refer to some of our stats and figures throughout this presentation, we refer to the New South Wales State of Volunteering Report, and if by now you haven't had a read of it, do head over to our website and take a bit of a look, because there's some really great information in there. And they surveyed people between the ages of 18 and 24 to get that data. So we'll just keep that into perspective as well. What I'll also be doing too is towards the end of this, I'll be popping you through a really cool information sheet that's come from Justice Connect. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not going to get into any legal or insurance information here. I'm neither a lawyer, nor am I into insurance. And to be honest with you, the last thing you want is any of those two levels of advice from me. I struggle to keep myself out of trouble, and I struggle to make sure I'm up on the latest insurances. That being said, Justice Connect do have a wealth of fantastic information over on their site. And this particular fact sheet that I'm going to send through to you provides a little bit more structure around the legal side of working with youth. But the cool piece of information that I've actually found is that you don't need to do a lot in the way of working with youth volunteers from a legal perspective. In fact, something that actually was a bit of news to myself was that you don't even need to get parent guardian consent. It's best practice, and I highly recommend it, so that at least someone who's under 18, legally considered a minor, that you've dot your I's and crossed your T's. Should you put something in place to let the parent know, maybe even get something as old-fashioned as a bit of a pen and paper on signature or something like that. But you don't have to. It is best practice. So when you're setting up your programs and you're thinking about working with youth, you might want to keep that in mind, have that as something that's worth putting in there just to keep on file, and also making sure that the parents and guardians are aware of the type of activities that the youth would be participating in. Which leads us to, are you ready? So before we get into how to engage with youth, let's talk about, are your programs ready? And these are a few bullet points I've pulled together thinking about the various things that you'll need to consider when looking at your volunteer programs. Now, some of you may have already considered this. Some of you may already have youth in your programs at the moment, and you're just looking at better ways to engage with them, and we'll get you covered very shortly. But for those of you who are sort of still new to this, start looking at things like, have you considered your insurance implications? I cannot stress this enough. I highly recommend that you have a chat to your portfolio manager or your insurance manager or whoever you do have your insurance with, and just let them know you're looking to have youth engaged in the programs. What sort of issues may there be? What sort of implications might there be? Will there be any additional cover that you might need to get, etc., etc.? And then you may need to take that to your committee or your board and have a discussion at that level as well. Do you have any lower age limit on your programs, roles, or tasks? Okay, so there are going to be times when you've got to have people who have volunteers at a certain age, particularly when there's things like alcohol involved. There are rules around that. So take a look at the type of activities. I mean, if it's simply something like entering data into a spreadsheet, if they can type and they can use Excel, which they probably use a lot of this stuff better than most of us, to be honest with you, then there should be no reason to have an age limit. But if they are going to be working where there's alcohol involved or something like that, you would need to be mindful of it. You also don't necessarily want young kids doing roles that could potentially put them in harm's way. Working barbecues and the like might be something that you might want to put on the older kids. just so that, there's a bit of bit of risk mitigation, bit of safety involved. Have you got a process for gaining parental consent? Exactly what I was talking about before. Think of a way that you can actually go to parents and say, your child is looking to get involved with volunteering. These are the type of activities we'll be doing. These are the type of locations they'll be working from. These are the people who will be keeping an eye on them. Are you all cool with that? Feel free to come on down, check us out, and that will just keep things above board. It's also a good opportunity for you to think about your program. Can you get whole families involved? Nothing encourages young kids to then build a passion for volunteering than to be doing it with their family. And it could be a really cool opportunity. You see it in sporting organisations all the time, where one of the kids might get involved in a particular sport and the rest of the family gets roped into doing the volunteering for that sport, running the barbecue. Maybe they end up doing the timekeeping. Maybe it's even just handling the canteen duty, all sorts of different activities. And it becomes a real family affair. And why not? I mean, if you've got to sit there and spend your early mornings going out to sporting events, you might as well get involved, and it all helps encourage that volunteering and giving back type of passion. Are working with children checks required for your volunteers and for your youth volunteers, and particularly when you've got volunteers who are 18 above, potentially working with kids? So again, make sure you go over and check out the type of activities. If you head over to the New South Wales government website, you'll see that there's plenty of information there on working with children's checks. We've also got a lot of information over on our website, and you can go through and look at the type of activities that you're doing with your organisation, looking at what involvement there may be if you've got a mix between 18 and above and 18 and younger, and whether or not the checks are required. If you're not too sure, feel free to contact us. We're more than happy to point you in the right direction. But as I say, on a webinar like this, it's very hard to give very specific advice. And have you reviewed and revised your policies and risk management strategies to accommodate youth volunteering? Now, as I found talking to a lot of organisations, particularly amidst COVID, a lot of policies and procedures haven't been dusted off in a long time. If you're looking at getting involved with youth, it is probably worthwhile sitting there, pulling the handbook down, the policies and procedures, the folder that hasn't seen the light of day for decades, dust the cobwebs off and have a bit of a look. Not only is it a great time to look at it from a youth perspective, but it might be worthwhile having a look at your policies and procedures just in general, a bit like spring cleaning. Good opportunity to do it and a catalyst to do so. Okay. So what's the biggest message I can give you today? Well, this is a message that if you've attended some of my sessions previously, you might have seen before. And it's the type of message that I think is really important for all volunteer managers and coordinators to keep in mind, regardless of who your volunteers are, what their age is, what their backgrounds are. Address their barriers, embrace their motivations. Now, everyone's going to have different barriers and everyone's going to have different motivations when it comes to volunteering. For youth, they're going to be somewhat specific to a younger generation. Maybe. Some barriers are going to be universal regardless. Motivations, similar sort of thing. And you can actually see that firsthand. If you flick through some of the statistics in the State of Volunteering report, you'll actually see that a lot of the barriers and a lot of the motivations are similar. How important certain things are may rise and fall within the top 10, if you will, but they are pretty similar. And most importantly, and I can't stress this enough, the best way to find out what a person's motivations are, regardless of age, is to talk to them. And funnily enough, the best way to find out their barriers is to talk to them, which can also pose a problem too when it comes to communicating with young people, because they might be speaking Swahili, or you may not be able to actually pin them down to have that conversation. But that's where I can give you some hints and tips on how to best engage with them based on both experience and also talking to a lot of youth volunteers. So these stats that I keep talking about, I've pulled a couple out for you. You can see here, now this is from the youth volunteering section of the report. 48.6% of youth volunteers are motivated to give their time to develop new skills or gain work experience. This is a huge one. Now at the top, you can see that 66% are there to help others, and that's fine. We all know volunteers are there to help. That's almost, to me, just a given. But what else does a volunteer get out of the work they do? What is their volunteer pay packet? And for youth, a lot of them really want to develop their skills. They want to gain work experience. You can see just below that, use my skills and experience. For a lot of them, they are looking to actually build the skills they need to further their careers, to get into a career, to try new things, to experiment. For those of you who've got your camera on and anyone who wants to quickly throw their camera on, a quick show of hands. Who stayed in the one career their whole working life? I don't even have to look at the screen. I know what the answer to that is. Now, who spent a bit of time when they were younger dabbling, trying new things, maybe jumped a few jobs? Yep, we all have. And the cool part about volunteering is that it encourages people to come in and have a go. It encourages people to try new things. And when you're young and you're trying to gain work experience, I mean, I find the funniest thing when you have a look at jobs online, in the paper, wherever. You're looking for a new role, and it's an entry-level role. And the pay is certainly at an entry level. But they want 5 years experience. Sorry, what? If I've been working in a role for 5 years, I probably wouldn't consider myself entry level. In fact, after 5 years, I'd like to hope that I'm at least competent, if not proficient in that role. Yet, when you're trying to find a new career path, when you're looking to dabble or try something out, maybe you've got a bit of a skill, a bit of a passion, and you just want to see whether it would work for you, trying to get into those roles can be really quite difficult. I know myself, as an absolute tech nerd, I wanted to get into IT. I was adamant I was going to be IT support. And I'll tell you what, I will never do that role ever again. 4 o'clock wake up calls because someone's printer didn't work was not my idea of fun. Now, unfortunately, the only way I got to dabble in that was to get a role, an entry level role. But since I'm a lot older now, it's funnily enough, the amount of times I can dabble in IT with various different volunteering has been phenomenal. I've built websites for people. I've managed customer management systems. I've installed new technology and the like. Best part is I can always say no because I'm not getting paid by someone to do it. I'm helping, I'm contributing. So I still get to, feel good about it. I get to play with new technologies, which taps into my motivation of being a tech nerd, but I'm not obligated. It doesn't feel like I'm stuck in the IT rut that I was. And the cool part is it's kept me current, if you will, in the IT world. So for young people who are dabbling, who are still thinking, what do they want to do? Maybe they're doing a uni course or a TAFE course. Maybe they've just fresh out of school. Maybe they're still in school and they're looking to build some experience so that when they sit down with an employer, they can say, hey, I've done that. And they've got some real proof. Then volunteering could be the way to go. We'll touch on that a little bit further, but let's now explore the barriers. So it's all good. We know they've got the motivation, but what's the barriers? Well, the biggest one's time. Time is a barrier for everyone, but time for young people can be really, really prominent because of the fact that they generally will have some kind of study. If they're a school-age student, they're in school. If they're off to uni, they've got a very random schedule in some cases, depending on what their uni course dictates. If they're not in uni, they might have part-time work that they've got to manage. Plus, depending on their home life, they could have various different commitments at home. And then the growing social life. I mean, I hate to say it, but as much as volunteering is magnificent, I absolutely love it and stand for it. When I was 18 years of age, my social life was king. Just saying, and I'm sure there's plenty of young people out there who will agree. Costs. Volunteering can be expensive when you consider the cost to get involved, even just getting there, particularly if you have no transport. So you need to factor that in as well. Now, I'm not saying that what you need to do is have a big bag of cash that for every young volunteer that comes in, you're going to give it to them, because that would defeat the purpose. But structuring your programs in such a way to factor in the costs that are involved, the travel that's involved, will allow you to be more inclusive to them and allow them to take on various opportunities and still help you out without it hitting their bottom line. And we can talk more about that in a sec. So before I get into some of the more pragmatic ways to get over the barriers and tap into the motivations, I want you to think about the type of volunteering you could offer those who have limited time, sporadic time, or a schedule that's all over the shop. And 3 great types of volunteering for youth are virtual volunteering, which has become really quite prominent since COVID. And we've started to see that we have the technology, and as managers, we have the skills to let people volunteer remotely. We may feel a little bit uncomfortable with it at times, but believe me, it can open up a world of opportunities. I'm not going to harp too much on about virtual volunteering. We actually have a virtual volunteering session that I delivered last month, and the recordings are floating around, and we can get those to you if you after that. But yeah, certainly it's opened up a whole new world, particularly for younger people to get involved with volunteering. Micro volunteering, really small, potentially even project-based volunteering. Something that you can set up, they deliver, and then it can be closed down, if you will, and then maybe re-engaged again. And that could be also like episodic volunteering, but I see the difference being that with episodic, it's kind of like watching your favorite series on Netflix. You know, when it comes out, you binge it, and then you're going to have to sit there and wait another 12 months for the next season if it gets re-signed. Same with this. You could sit there and go, okay, we know that we're always going to have this event that comes up every year, or this series of events, or this particular activity that we do at this regular point in time. And you can engage young volunteers to get involved in that, and they can schedule it into their rest of their life. With micro volunteering or project-based, again, you can sit there and target people who are available at certain times of the year. If you, say, for instance, have a unique event coming up and you know that you want to get a lot of young people involved, the last thing you're going to do is set that project up right over a uni's exam period. Trust me, you are going to see no one real quick, smart, and in a jiffy. And that's something I've learned from working at the radio station. Our radio station is actually on the University of Tasmania's campus. They don't own us, but it does allow us to promote to a lot of youth, and we get a lot of interest. But the quickest way you're going to see tumbleweeds is to do anything over exam periods. It's not going to happen. They disappear. Some of them disappear, I think, just to try and make it through the exams, and others disappear for longer because they're putting some time into study and the like. You can also tell when there's major assignments on, or you're coming to that sort of peak part of a uni semester where they've got a lot of different project work on and group work, because they start to become a little less contactable as well. And you've got to keep that in mind. And the best way, I had no idea, to be honest with you, when the uni semesters were. I had no idea what the sort of workloads were or anything like that until I sat down and talked to a few of them and actually started to get a feel for the peaks and troughs in their workload just in their studies. So again, re-emphasizing that you need to talk to your volunteers, and particularly those who have got this kind of workload on, to find out when you can implement programs, projects, certain tasks. Because if you expect them to be available 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, you're kidding yourself. And then even after hours, you've got to keep that in mind as well. What can they do after hours? Particularly if you think about, say, school-age students who might want to get involved. They finish at 3 p.m., but then they might have homework they've got to get to. Sporting practice. Maybe they've got chores they've got to do at home. So how can you get those guys involved? Is it something that you could set a set time? Maybe it's at 5 o'clock in the evening and they come in for an hour or so to work on something collectively. Okay, that might mean that you'd need to find someone within your group who can look after them and oversee them. But there might be someone in your team who actually wants to do that, have that level of flexibility. Particularly great pairing up youth with, say, some of your volunteers who have got kids. So they might be able to sit down and go, okay, great. Well, I've got certain things I need to do straight after school because I've just done school pickup. I need to get home, get the dinner on, get the whatever happening. And then I'm available to pop back in and help these guys out, or maybe bring my own kids along. Just a different way of thinking about things as well can help in that regard. And as you can see, I'm starting to get into that process of helping you think about how to redesign your programs, how to look at your existing programs holistically and not necessarily scrap them and start again, but what tweaks could you make? And the thing with the programs is to make sure that there's some flexible time commitment. You're going to have to look at your programs and go, where can I remove some of the rigidness? Do I necessarily need to have everyone together at the same time? Or are there tasks that can be done at various times of the day or in their free time? One of the cool things we offer, and we've actually really done more of it of late since COVID with our volunteers, is allowed them to get on with the work we need done when it suits them. And you're probably like, oh no, that's the quickest way to get nothing done. I hope you address that in a second. But let me tell you, we've actually found more things are getting done when we allow them the flexibility and the ability to work from anywhere. Not having to come to a set location to do something that could be done online, for instance, has meant that the amount of things that are getting done after hours, on weekends, before hours has been phenomenal. Some of the work we need done regularly are things like scheduling, promotions, recording voiceovers. And the best part of this stuff is that for those who are involved in this, they can usually do a lot of it from home. Okay, some of the voiceover stuff needs to be done from the studio, but we do have some volunteers who are heavy into audio and they've got microphones and equipment, kind of like myself, microphone in front of me. And all they need is a quiet room to sit there and do the voiceover promos and the like, and they can edit it all up from home and they can get all that done when they feel like it. Updating member spreadsheets and sending out newsletters and writing up newsletters, updating the website. What else have we got? Creating social media posts, scheduling social media posts, all done remotely and all done when it fits into their schedule. Because what we do is we set when we need them done and we stay in communication with them. Break larger roles down. This was a fun one. I had a chat to our station manager, and this is an argument I have had and can bring a lot of experience to this. I remember being in the office one day there pre-COVID. We need to get someone else in to do marketing. Okay, do you now? And I said, why? Well, we need someone to do all our social media and our newsletter and this, that, and the other, and maybe go out and speak to sponsors. Oh, yeah. How much you paying them? No, we need a volunteer. So what you're telling me is that you want someone to volunteer for a role that could possibly get 60K out in the wild. And you want them full-time? Oh, no, part-time. Oh. And you expect people to fit all that work into their free time? Oh, yeah, you're kidding yourself. Break the role down. So what do you need? Okay, well, we need someone to do our newsletter. Great. Well, that's one role. Social media. Great. That actually could be two roles, someone to write the copy and someone to create the social media images in Canva. Oh, go out and speak to sponsors. Well, find someone who's maybe got time during 9 to 5 to speak to sponsors. Do we have any volunteers that have a free day in their schedule? Oh, and suddenly you're breaking these roles down so that they're not so mammoth. And they start to feel more like a volunteering role than I'm actually doing the work of someone who should get paid. And if that's the case, maybe they should actually be looking for that particular role and getting paid. And then you've lost a good volunteer. But by breaking it down, with the exception of the person who needs to have meetings during business hours, all those roles too were able to be done offline, after hours, from anywhere. And they were project-based activities. Now, these were ongoing project-based, but everything was project-based. That's how we kept the track of it. We set it up as campaigns. We set it up as the monthly newsletter. So each month was a little project, and we could keep track on it. We could set SMART goals and track where it was at. And we had little things like having back channel conversations using platforms like Slack for organizations that are set up with Microsoft Office. You have Teams, which works just as well. Slack was just what we used because this was, we haven't got Microsoft Office at the station. We're a Google Suite or Google Workspaces organization. And Slack's been we've been using it from way before Teams was even conceived. And it seems to work well for us. Keeping spreadsheets. No need to have any massive project management, software to look after it. Keeping spreadsheets. And I think actually a couple of the ones who came in working on social media, and I say a couple of the ones because we also accepted that these roles were a bit like a revolving door. As people's time commitment changed and as people moved through uni and potentially needed to focus on their studies for the final year or went off to do work experience or, heaven forbid, needed to get a full-time job after their studies. And that will happen regardless of age, whether they're school-age students, whether they're just youth and they're out there with a part-time job and they suddenly move into full-time work, or whether they're uni students. Their time commitment is going to change. And often your biggest competitor is going to be getting full-time work, which is fair enough. They've got bills to pay as well. Offer opportunities to learn or develop new skills. One of the things I'm heavily for promoting is put your hand up and let's have a go. If it's not going to cost you anything, why not? This is the cool part about volunteering, is the fact that you can often have a go at something that you feel confident to do, but you want some experience. And unlike, say, a paid role where you're being paid to get the job done, volunteering, okay, you're not getting paid for it. So if you are a little bit slower with it, fine. Be realistic with your volunteers and think, well, the fact that they're willing to have a go at something, particularly maybe it's something you hadn't even thought of. Maybe someone's willing to sit there and go, hey, I've got a really cool idea. What do you think? And you're like, I hadn't even thought of that. Well, it's going to cost us nothing to implement, or the cost is negligible. Let's have a go. Let's see if it works. You could get some added benefit out of it. And the whole time, just keep some clear and trackable outputs. Communicate with people and go, okay, when we're doing these tasks, this is how we're going to track what we're doing. Maybe use a spreadsheet, maybe use something like Asana or any of the free project management tools that aren't like using old Microsoft Project that you had to just about be a rocket scientist to understand. It's funny, talk to a lot of youth volunteers and you start talking Gantt charts and the like, and they have no idea what you're talking about because most of them move to these boards where you can slide things along. And to be honest with you, even in all my years of project management, I think I find that a lot easier to quickly glance at than a damn Gantt chart. Communicate with your volunteers. Throughout all this, communication is absolutely important, folks. I cannot stress this enough. But is email or phone really the best way to communicate? Now, I want you to have a think for a moment of all the young people you know. How many of them have their mobile phone glued to their hand, yet if you try to call them, they don't pick up? I see a few smiles and a few nods. It's funny, they've got their phones glued to their hands. They've got these mini computers glued to their hands, yet you can never get in touch with them. They don't want to talk on the phone. Heck, most of them don't even want to text via SMS anymore. I remember when SMS was like so expensive and it was so cool to be able to text your mate and you got everything into so many characters just so that it didn't go over and cost you 2 messages. And now it's totally free and they don't even want to do that. But they're still contactable. They're still talking to their friends via a wealth of different platforms. Messenger, WhatsApp, TikTok, Snapchat. And for some people, you're probably just like, what? But the reality is this could be where you just need to find out what the platform is they want to use and that they're willing to use because they are inundated with information per minute. They are more connected than we've ever been with so much information coming at them, but they've almost worked out their own ways through often ignoring certain things to navigate that quagmire. And so the best way to reach out to them is to actually say, what do they want to use? Now, I mentioned before at the station, we use Slack and people were happy with that because it was a happy medium between emails, in which case there was absolutely no way we could email our volunteers because most of them being students, their email boxes were already well and truly overflowing with emails from the university on assignments, their project teams, their lecturers, the university itself, so on and so forth. So by having Slack there, they were able to sit there and communicate at certain times. They knew that when Slack dinged, they knew it was the station and we wanted something. And they could get involved in the conversation and then bail out of it, but still keep track of what was being said if they wanted to. They could have side conversations through direct messaging and have it all in one location so they just knew that was the university's contact tool. And that came about just through talking to people. We do still send emails. I'm not saying you get rid of email altogether. We do still send emails, and there are some that are very formal and they're written up in such a way so that they know that when they come through, they've got to address it, and we keep them very minimal. And we're also prepared to have to follow up through multiple channels when we need those emails addressed. But for the general day-to-day, we found a platform that works. There is no one or right answer to this, folks. There really won't be, but talk to your teams, talk to them and find out what they like using. I've had to, particularly with one of the projects I've done in my own personal time, I found the only way I could communicate with them was to start up a separate group on Facebook Messenger, which actually had some benefits because when the project was over, I was able to exit out of the group and didn't have to listen to the rubbish that came afterwards. So just think about that from your own perspectives as well. But yes, it might be a little bit challenging to have to get used to some of these platforms, but you too can then bail out of it after the fact. What's important is that you're considering the ways to communicate with them on a level that they feel comfortable with and that they'll stay engaged. with. So many times do I talk to volunteer organizations and they say, our youth just do not engage. Well, it's not that they don't engage, they're just maybe not seeing what you're putting out there, or maybe they are ignoring it deliberately. And it's not through ignorance or being rude, it's about trying to manage the multitude of information they've got coming at them at any given point in time. Just want to touch on real quickly, I'm not going to go over this too extensively. I'm sure most of you being in coordination and management type roles will have heard of SMART goals before. I find that this is the best way to keep, anyone engaged and on task, but it particularly works well with youth because then you can make sure that you are really hitting the mark. Keep it specific what you want them to do. Make sure it's measurable. Is it achievable? Don't give them something that is like shooting for the moon, particularly where they're going to have so much else on. It's nice to have stretch targets and all that when you're working on your KPIs in your professional life, but sometimes just keeping it straight up achievable, easy to do, and they don't feel like a failure if they can't get it done in time or whatever else, will keep them feeling positive and engaged. Make sure it's relevant. I'm sorry to say, but if all you're doing is trying to get people to come in to clear out your office of boxes and putting them into the storeroom, you're not going to keep them engaged real often. And the amount of times I see that happen is unbelievable. They're giving up what little free time they have available and they're looking to gain something out of it. As we've said, we've just covered off, they might be looking to gain work experience. I don't know too many resumes that I've looked at where seeing on there was able to clear out a storeroom meant much to me. It might have demonstrated they had organizational skills, but to be honest with you, it wasn't high on my agenda of things to look for on as a recruiter. And this is really important too. This leads into, I guess now what I would say is one of the best things you can do for a young volunteer. Recognize their volunteering. And this is not just giving them an award. I cannot stress this enough. One of the best ways you can recognize a young volunteer is to actually provide them with a reference that clearly details the work they have done for you, the benefit it provided your organization, and as much detail as possible as to what the output was. If you can allow them to have a portfolio of the work, you are setting them up for success. This goes back to what I was saying right at the very start, where I asked you all who has tried to get into various different roles over time and they've dabbled. And you look at these entry-level positions that want 5 years experience and all that, which is a joke. The reality is if they've been volunteering with you for any length of time and they've worked on a range of projects and they've provided fantastic outputs that has had benefit to your organization, if you simply provide them with the reference that says John Bloggs volunteered between this date and this date, an employer will not care. They might be interested in the fact that this person has actually been volunteering and they can see there's a level of motivation there to work and to offer back to the community. But when you're trying to compare skills with this candidate and this candidate, I need to know more than the fact that they volunteered for your organization. What I would love to see is if I got a reference here that said that during the time of volunteering, they worked on this project, and this project, but saw them develop this, and this. They had this level of achievement to the organization and provided this level of benefit. I'm suddenly sitting there going, here's someone who may not have been paid for their work, which to me is a huge tick because they've done it all voluntarily, but has got real world experience. And obviously, all things considered around IP and things that are commercially sensitive. But if you can allow a person to show a portfolio of what they've done, particularly if it's something in the space of marketing or comms, or even if they build a website for you and they can really talk to it and go through different sections and maybe even allow them a dummy login to take them behind any member management stuff they may have implemented, all this sort of stuff that they could talk to an employer about, That is gold. That is recognition of volunteering that is worth more than a piece of paper to say thanks for a year of service with me. Because I'll tell you now, that piece of paper is not even going to make it into the awards scrapbook, because I don't know if anyone keeps those now because everything's digital. Also being readily available to take a phone call and chat to a potential employer about what they've done for you and the benefit they've added would be massive as well. I would also preface this by saying that if you're going to promote that you're the sort of organization that will recognize someone's efforts through this level of references or whatever else, set a guideline with your volunteers that, hey, this isn't just a case of showing up, ticking the box and then going home or not putting the effort in. You will give references where references are due, and the reference you provide will reflect the work you've provided. So put in minimal effort, you're going to get a minimal reference. Put in fantastic effort, you're going to put in the effort in to write the reference. I think it goes both ways, to be fair. I don't want anyone to think that you've got to write War and Peace when they barely showed up for the W in the heading. To summarize, provide recognitions of skills and experience to your volunteers, offer a variety and ability to gain experience and learn new skills, offer flexibility and the ability to fit volunteering around competing priorities, study, home life, social life, and consider volunteering as a pathway to employment. And not only will you retain youth volunteers, you will engage them and encourage them to join your organization. But joining your organization is yet another battle, and I want to give you some advice on that as well. Do they really know who you are? Now, this goes for just about anyone, but when it comes to youth volunteers, as I mentioned, these kids have got so much information shooting at them from every direction: social media, the internet in general, their friends, their family, their lecturers, employers, It's all noise. Do they really know who your organization is and why they should care? And that comes down to promote what you do. When young people are looking to volunteer, they're going to go with those who are front of mind. Promote what you do. Show off. Show the good that you do. There's no point just advertising for some young volunteers to come to your organization and they have no idea who you are or why they should. Generate some hype. Social media is noisy. How are you going to cut through and build that awareness? I've just listed down the bottom there with their icons 7 platforms, and there's probably more. You've got to make noise on those platforms to get the youth you want. And when you're thinking about the youth you want and the platforms you go after, think about what skills potentially you want to gain.